Today, we're going to break down a conflict that has put the entire global system on a knife's edge. Let's get right into it.
This isn't just another regional war. To put it bluntly, the head of the International Energy Agency has called it the greatest global energy security challenge in history. That one sentence really sets the stage for the stakes we're about to explore.
So let's set the scene. It's February 2026, and the Middle East is at war. What for decades was this kind of shadow conflict, sanctions, proxies, cyber attacks, has suddenly burst out into the open.
The first shots were fired, and they were swift and absolutely devastating. You have coordinated U.S.-Israeli strikes that take out Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, himself. Now, Iran's response? It wasn't symbolic. It was massive. And crucially, they shut down the Strait of Hormuz, a vital oil artery, which immediately sent the world into a crisis.
So in this explainer, we're going to dissect this conflict piece by piece. First, we'll look at the spark that lit the fire. Then we'll dig into the decades of distrust that fueled it. We'll also break down the very different military strategies at play here. And finally, we'll trace that global shockwave this war has sent through our interconnected world.
All right, let's start with the opening salvos of the war itself. What exactly happened in those first critical hours?
The sheer scale of the initial attack was immense. Under the codenames Operation Epic Fury and Roaring Lion, a combined U.S.-Israeli force launched over 2,000 strikes. And these weren't just tactical hits either. These were strategic attacks aimed at decapitating Iran's leadership and neutralizing its most critical military and, of course, its nuclear infrastructure.
Now look at this. Iran's response wasn't just focused on the U.S. and Israel. It was a full-blown regional counteroffensive. Just look at the numbers here. Over 1,200 ballistic missiles, more than 2,300 drones, and they're not just hitting Israel, they're targeting assets all across the Gulf, in the UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait. This was clearly designed to broaden the battlefield and inflict maximum pain, both economic and military, on America's allies in the region.
But an explosion of this magnitude, well, it doesn't just happen overnight. It requires decades of built-up pressure. The events of February 2026 were really the culmination of a long, deeply troubled history. So the real question is, how do we get here?
To really understand this war, we have to rewind the clock, because this conflict is rooted in more than 70 years of grievances, interventions, and deep ideological opposition.
This timeline really shows the key turning points that fueled the fire. It all starts back in 1953 with a CIA-backed coup, an event that is absolutely foundational to Iran's distrust of the West. Then you have the 1979 revolution, which turned an ally into an adversary, and all the way up to the 2020 assassination of a top commander, Qasem Soleimani. You can see how each event just added another layer of animosity, pushing everyone closer and closer to the brink of war.
Okay, let's turn to the military front now. This is not a conflict of equals in the traditional sense. Not at all. Instead, it's a textbook case of what we call asymmetric warfare, with two vastly different strategies colliding.
So on one side, you've got the United States and Israel. They have overwhelming air superiority, the most advanced military tech in the world, and a navy that can project power globally. But on the other side, you have Iran, which has spent decades developing capabilities to counter those very advantages. They know they can't compete plane for plane, so they've invested heavily in other things: ballistic missiles, swarms of low-cost drones, and a network of regional proxy forces. The whole point of Iran's strategy is to make the cost of a conventional war just unacceptably high for its enemies.
Iran's ballistic missile program is really the cornerstone of its national defense. See, they haven't been able to maintain a modern air force because of decades of sanctions, so they poured all those resources into developing the biggest and most diverse missile arsenal in the region. And this isn't just about defense, it's about what they call deterrence by punishment, basically the ability to inflict severe, unacceptable damage on any attacker. And to protect them, these assets are hidden away in this vast, secret network of underground missile cities.
The other key piece of Iran's strategy is its proxy network. We're talking about groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, and various militias across Iraq and Syria. These groups act as force multipliers. They allow Iran to project its power, to challenge its rivals, and to wage this unconventional warfare all across the Middle East without having to engage its own conventional forces directly. It's their way of creating a multi-front conflict and bogging down their enemies far from their own borders.
Okay, now we need to broaden our focus, because a war in the Persian Gulf doesn't stay in the Persian Gulf. Its consequences are immediate, severe, and they are absolutely global.
This quote here just perfectly captures why this matters to everyone, everywhere. This is not merely a regional conflict, it is a pressure point on the entire global system. When that pressure point gets squeezed, the entire system feels the pain. And this right here, this is the epicenter of that pressure, the Strait of Hormuz. It is without a doubt the most important oil transit choke point in the world. A tiny, narrow waterway that is the literal lifeline for much of the global economy.
Just think about this single staggering number, 30%. Nearly a third of all global seaborne oil and a quarter of all liquefied natural gas passes through this tiny strait every single day. Iran's geographic position gives it immense leverage over this artery. And this just brilliantly illustrates the immediate impact. Within only 24 hours of the conflict escalating, tanker traffic through the strait basically collapsed. It plummeted by 94%. The world's energy supply chain was effectively severed at its most vulnerable point, and that caused an immediate and violent reaction in global markets.
And this is a number that economists were terrified of. As the crisis deepened, oil prices were projected to hit $140 a barrel, a price that would inflict severe economic pain on countries and consumers all over the world.
And here's the real-world consequence of that number. According to Oxford Economics, that price point, if it's sustained, isn't just a market fluctuation. It is a full-blown recession trigger capable of tipping major economies into contraction.
And the fallout, it extends way beyond the gas pump. It creates a domino effect. You have surging inflation that makes everything more expensive. Air travel gets massively disrupted. Financial markets become extremely volatile. And the political strain of the crisis even begins to fracture long-standing international alliances. It's a multi-dimensional shockwave.
So, when you put it all together, here's the crucial takeaway. What we're seeing is the violent eruption of a 70-year rivalry. It has transformed from a kind of Cold War into a hot, multi-dimensional conflict. And its consequences, they're being felt not just on the battlefields of the Middle East, but in every market, every supply chain, and every diplomatic capital across the globe.
This conflict has completely shattered the old strategic order of the Middle East. And that leaves us with a critical question for the future. As the dust settles on this new reality, what new power dynamics, what unexpected alliances, and what unforeseen dangers will rise from the ashes?